What is up, everybody? This is Noa Dalzell, and I am here with a You Got Boston episode live from Miami. Looking forward to talking all things Celtics road trip. Celtics have now won 6 in a row on the road, and looking forward to answering all your questions because it's been a little bit of time since I last did one of these. So feel free to put any and all questions in the chat as we kind of walk through just this last couple weeks because I haven't done one of these since the last road trip. So any questions, put them in the chat. In the meantime, I will talk about just what I think the keys have been to the Celtics' road dominance because it has been quite a remarkable stretch of victories here. They won 6 in a row, and really every road trip so far has been a success between 3-1, the first road trip of January, 3-1 again. Then they had a 3-0 road trip, and now they have a 2-0 road trip. So if only they were able to string together these kinds of efforts at home, they would be by far the most dominant team in the league. So right now I'm in Miami. I'm heading to the airport in a cubicle in the apartment complex that I'm staying in. So I'm heading to the airport from here, and I'll be heading back to Boston. And we got one more game before the All-Star break tomorrow. Celtics Spurs, new look Spurs with De'Aaron Fox, and obviously Victor Wembanyama returns to TD Garden after making his debut last season. So we'll talk about a couple things. I've also been in the locker room. I actually just got locker room access this, these past few months. So it's been really helpful to just get a better sense of the team and just kind of the dynamics at play. So I can kind of share more about that. There were some funny moments yesterday when we walked into the locker room where the Celtics were debating the all-time best Celtics. And if I understood correctly, so don't quote me on it, but I think Jayson Tatum was making a strong case why was Larry Bird. And then he was kind of talking about how he was vying for that leading scorer spot from Havlicek. So just good vibes after the win yesterday. And then I appreciate this message, Tom. I also just wanted to say I do these shows. I'm trying to do these shows as much as I can. I also do a post-game show on the Garden Report on CLNS Media that I'm sure many of you already watch. You can tune into that after every game. I'm always on alongside Bobby Manning, our other reporter, and the rest of the cast. But I also, if you want to read, I do a Celtics notebook on CelticsBlog.com after every game, and you can kind of read just everything. My goal is to basically just tell the full story of everything that happened in the game, what I'm feeling from the locker room, what I'm seeing from the players. If there's little storylines or little tidbits that wouldn't fit in a normal article, I do a little notebook, and it's almost, sometimes they can be very long, so you can kind of scroll through them and see what you want to read. But I appreciate you, Tom, for plugging that because it has been another effort of mine to just kind of go behind the scenes for people and just kind of explain what the temperature check is on the ground. So I'll start at the top just because I think there's really only one way to fairly talk about this game and this stretch, and that's Jayson Tatum. Because in these last 2 road games, Celtics are looking good. Opposing teams are making a push because, they're good teams, right? New York Knicks, Miami Heat, these are not teams that are just going to fold. So they make a push. They cut it to single digits. They cut a Celtics double-digit lead to single digits. And then this is 2 games in a row now. The Jayson Tatum has just absolutely taken over the basketball game. And I don't know what it is about the third quarters, but he had 19 points against the Knicks. He somehow one-ups that with 20 points against the Heat last night in that third quarter. And it was pretty interesting because I thought he looked really bad in the first half. To be blunt, it was one of the worst halves that I've seen from him in a while. He was on the injury report. He was questionable right up until game time. He wasn't at the Celtics optional shoot around, so I don't know. He usually attends those, but they are optional. And so I didn't really think we were gonna see him play. And then he's available to play, and then he doesn't look super engaged. Goes 3 of 10 in the first half, the -7 in the first half, which was a team worst. And then there's a sequence of plays in the end of the first half that Joe Mazzulla was as livid as I've literally ever seen him. Tatum took an ill-advised 3. He described it later as an ill-advised 3, and then he didn't run back on defense and let Bam Adebayo hit a 3-pointer off the glass to cut the deficit to, I think, 9 points. So Miami has all this momentum coming into the game, into the halftime. And everybody was pretty honest with us yesterday. Al Horford said Joe was not happy at halftime. Tatum said he challenged me, and I asked Tatum, what gives with you taking over these third quarters? And he said firsthand, he said, I did not, I didn't have my imprint on the game in the first half. It was uncharacteristic, and I knew I had to wake up. And so he woke up, right? He was hitting everything. He was dominant on both ends. And he ends up putting together another masterful game, and kind of puts the game totally out of reach. By the time the fourth quarter started, this one was pretty much over. So it's back-to-back games that Tatum's done that. It was funny because I asked Joe after the game, I usually, after wins, it's like you can ask him about like, oh, this guy played great, this guy played great, this guy played great. But I actually felt like a big part of the story was how mad he got because he doesn't usually express that so visibly. And I asked him like, you were pretty pissed off about that 7-0 run. I didn't use that word, but going into the half, like, what's your message to the team? Like, how do you move on from that as a coach? And he like lashed on to me asking that, and it was basically like, if we had lost this game, that would have been the story because we need to close quarters better. And it's something that he's just so big about is closing quarters. There's a couple of things that if you cover Joe or if you watch the game all the time, like there are a lot of things that you realize that he just values a ton. And one of those things is closing quarters. Another one of those things is limiting opposing teams to 25 points per quarter, which they did last night. I think all 4 quarters, I believe they did. They held them to 85 points in the night. So a really good defensive performance. And they didn't have Hero and they missed shots, but generally speaking, a really good defensive performance. And so, yeah, I think that at a certain point, like there is something to be said about the fact that this team is able to kind of lock in. This team is able to flip the switch, and you don't want to become a flip the switch team, but he has certainly become a flip the switch player these last few games where you can just tell he turns it on, he's super engaged, and he just wants to kind of blow the game open, and he did it twice now, and Joe said that he challenged them, and he said we can't overlook those stretches because this time we got away with it, but we're not always going to be able to get away with it. So what does it feel like watching Tatum take over a game live? I'll be honest, what it feels like is that you're watching a game turn from an away game to a home game. Because by the time that quarter ended, that Kaseya Center, that place was inundated with Celtics fans. They were literally everywhere. I was walking around the concourse before the game, and I was like, this feels like the TD Garden concourse, just there's Celtics fans everywhere. And, granted, they have their own fan base, Miami, and, definitely there were some cheers early on when they played well. As soon as Tatum started his takeover, it felt like you were at TD Garden. So that's kind of what it feels like to me. Same thing with Madison Square Garden. Like there are so many Celtics fans in the building that are at these away games that all of a sudden, like you have this sense of like, okay, we're pretty much at a home game now. So that's what it feels like. And it just feels like you're watching greatness. I think this all the time. I feel very lucky to be covering this team. I feel very lucky to be covering great players because you could be a reporter for 10 years and not cover any players or any team as great as Jayson Tatum and the Celtics. And so there's a moment of just like kind of gratitude, honestly, that I feel being in the building and being able to be for free at these games. Like I certainly feel that it goes through my mind. And so sometimes it's fun to watch it on TV. A lot of times I try to rewatch games as much as I can. But I think, last night was a pretty special performance on the heels of another really special performance. And he's on the injury report tomorrow, so he will play versus the Spurs, and then he'll have some all-star break. So, I see a comment here. Celtics and Clippers always feels like a home game. It's not just Clippers. Like I've been on the road for like almost every road game this year, and the only one that really felt like they had a very legit home crowd that couldn't be taken over by the Celtics fans was OKC. And I don't know if part of it was the fact that they had a really good game and the Celtics lost, so there wasn't much to cheer for. Like that was also one of the only road losses I've been at this year. But it definitely stood out. So it's been fun. I know it's kind of like a tired storyline. Like sometimes I asked Al about his, like, he had this moment of connection with the fans at the buzzer as the Celtics had won. Like Al was kind of going like this to the fans and locking eyes with them and kind of hyping them up. And I posted on Twitter, but I asked Al like, what is that moment like? Like what's going through your mind? And he said, it's just special, this connection with the fans. I just want to have that moment of acknowledgement. So I think players really appreciate it. It makes it easier for them to be on the road. And it's pretty fun as a reporter because people recognize me. I recognize people. Like there's a certain kind of like home away from home feeling, even when you're on the road, even in a place like Miami or New York that are, major media markets. So right now, Celtics are 4 games behind their record of last year, but their net rating is pretty much the same. By most metrics, defensive rating, offensive ratings, they're pretty much the same as they were last year. The big difference is that last year there weren't 2 teams that were playing better than them, and that's the Cavs and the Thunder. This year, those 2 teams have been more dominant than Boston, and so that's, I think, what kind of overshadowed them. And obviously, like, I'm not gonna lie and say that January was pretty basketball. It wasn't. But even so, like they're only 4 games behind where they were last year. And obviously last year they were at a historic regular season pace. So they'll want to close things out. They have a little bit of a tougher schedule after the All-Star break than they did last year. But certainly they're in good shape. And winning 6 of 7 is a big, kind of a big piece here of turning things around here and winning on the road, because a lot of these road trips were against mostly playoff teams, and they were able to string together win after win after win. The only 2 road losses, I believe, in 2025 was Oklahoma City and the Lakers. I didn't look that up, but I'm just thinking through in my mind really quick. Yeah, I think those are the only 2 road losses. So, and they've been on the road pretty much all of 2025. So it's been impressive. And then I love road games. I have like better access on the road because there are less reporters, there's less hurdles. I think players have their guard down with us a little bit more. So I like road games from that standpoint. And then I also just like the fact that there's road fans that are so excited to be there. I've written stories about this, but on the road, you have people that drove like 8 hours to make it to their first game. You have people that this is their one opportunity a year to see the team. So like I always feel bad for the home fans when the team is losing when they're home, and it's like people brought their kids and the whole arena is kind of deflated. But I have a special place in my heart for Celtics fans that only get to watch the team play once a year, if that. And so when it does come to town and the Celtics show is in Houston, like you want to see a win. And so I'm always glad when the Celtics are able to pull out wins, and I always talk to the fans before the game and connect with them. And so I hear a lot of stories that I'm like, I hope for this family that drove from Mexico, or I hope from, whatever, that the Celtics put on a good show. And they really have been very consistent. The Lakers game was like the one big letdown game. Even OKC, I mean, they had a lead at the half. So for the most part, they've been coming up kind of ready to go from these wins. So yeah, that's a good question though. Right now they're still, I think, 4 games behind the Cavs, 5 games behind the Cavs. They certainly have a chance. The Cavs are going to have to go on a little bit of a skid, and it's always possible. But I think their fate is a little bit out of their hands at this point. If the Cavs maintain their current pace of winning, I don't know that there's going to be 4 games to really make up realistically. But they haven't had like a really severe losing stretch. I think they lost 3 in a row once. The Hawks kind of got them, which was kind of weird. But yeah, I think I would guess right now, if I had to put money on it, I would expect the Celtics to not be able to catch up to the Cavs at this point. And I also don't think it really matters because, as I just talked about, like extensively, the road record has been really good. And if they have home court advantage in the first 2 rounds, and ultimately, that's not the end of the world. And who knows? I mean, the Cavs could also be eliminated before then. I never like to focus too much on particular like matchups, like one matchup. This is the key matchup because last year we did it with Denver. We talked all year about, are they going to beat the Nuggets? Are they going to beat the Nuggets? Nuggets didn't even make the conference final. So, we'll see. But yeah, ultimately, this is probably not super, super realistic. Just want to give a shout out before we continue here, and feel free to continue putting questions in, to our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible for all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. I don't know if you guys have used Prize Picks, but you can kind of make a lot of predictions on your knowledge as an NBA fan. People ask me all the time for predictions. Right now, you can check out promo tabs to tail any of the super sweat milli winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. So download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So, going to continue kind of looking through these questions. I also just wanted to say I do a daily show on the Bleacher Report app. So for those of you that want more regular podcast episodes, which I know some of you have reached out to me about the fact that there hasn't been a new show in a while. So it's Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays on the Bleacher Report app. I do a show on there. It's also same idea as this, like a 30-minute stream where I answer questions, that sort of thing. But the chat there is much emptier. So if you have questions, I can definitely get to them over there. So just on the note of road fans, I'll just close it out here. But what's the loudest, most hostile arena to play on the road? I always want to disclaim this is only my second year covering the team. I wasn't on the road too much last year, so I don't have like a huge sample size. Like for example, in LA, I thought the crowds were pretty weak, but then also there was like the fires that just happened, so I don't know if that was how much that was impacting the game, how much that was affecting things. But by far, Oklahoma City was the most hostile crowd this season. Cleveland was pretty good too. I got to give them that. So probably a little bit of a result of like those 2 teams having great years. So the fan bases are excited, they're engaged, they're not like washed out, they're not like basically just casual basketball fans that want to watch a game, or people that are actually there to watch the Celtics. Like that's what happens a lot of times. And those 2 fan bases are obviously in the mix for championships. So they're looking forward to that. And then I don't watch football like at all. I was rooting for the Eagles just because everybody told me to, and I know that I saw all the stuff like the Chiefs lose, America wins, all this. So I was like, I'll root for the Eagles. I like Jalen Hurts from just like hearing him talk about stuff. So, but I'm a one sport person completely. Which sometimes when Joe Mazzulla starts talking about like other sports, soccer, baseball, I'm like, okay, I gotta like read up on these kind of the connections here because I know everything about basketball and that's kind of the extent of my sports fandom and following. So, yeah, and Tom, absolutely, I think the late Cavs game just to close that loop on the record, like that's a must win if they want to close that loop, and they want to come back ultimately and win. So we'll see. And this is an interesting point. Like I do think there's a little bit of a different thing. Oh yeah, and then just shout out, yeah, if you are subscribed to my channel, You Got Boston, that's where my podcast episodes are, or you can also subscribe to CLNS Media where all of our shows are as well, but just hit the notification bell so you can get notifications when we go live. That's for post-game show, that's for myself on my channel, You Got Boston. My goal is to do these once a week, but I think that I'm going to start doing them more regularly as we gear towards the playoffs, and then honestly probably we'll do them daily during the playoffs, so tune in for daily Q&As during the playoffs. I know everybody is super locked in during the playoffs. I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for you guys to get all your questions answered if you'd like that. Yeah. Denver was okay. This is about the fan base thing. And then we'll move on from the fan base thing because I'm sure you guys want to hear other stuff too. Question, do you believe that, do you buy the narrative that Tatum has unlocked another dimension in his game with all the emotions he showed recently? I do think he's unlocked another level of emotion. I have noticed that. I also think that he, as a playmaker, has improved so much that he kind of has to be guarded a little bit differently. Like teams know they have to respect him as a playmaker to a degree that's just different from earlier in his career. It's really stood out. It's been super impressive. And I just think he's getting better. He's just getting better because he's hitting his prime and he's taken another leap from last year. The shots sometimes will fall, sometimes they won't. But so as long as he's locked in, like, and he generally speaking has been, like, obviously he's had quarters or moments that he hasn't been as much. Yeah, it's just been huge. So I've been super impressed with his performance. I do feel like he's having a little bit more anger or a little bit more energy. He's almost been like a little bit even more personable with the media. There was a funny clip last night that you guys can check out. I posted it on Twitter, but he was asked by a Lakers reporter about like, or not a Lakers reporter, but it was a guy that was clearly had a Lakers angle about like Luka going to the Lakers and about just what that was like. And if as a young Kobe fan, like, is he happy the Lakers have a new star? And he was like, I'm a Celtics fan. Like, I'm not a kid anymore. I don't watch the Lakers. And he had like a funny little quip there. So he's just kind of more, he's a little bit kind of breaking out of his shell a little, more so than he has in the past. But yeah, he's just been playing some great basketball. And then I just want to give a huge shout out. Nobody's asked about it specifically, but I want to give a huge shout out to the Celtics bench. Because I think the Celtics bench has just been tremendous as of late. Payton Pritchard, he had 2 back-to-back 20-plus point games entering last night. I talked to him at shoot-around yesterday, and we kind of talked about, like, sometimes he gets a decent amount of shots and he can score a lot. Other times he's really barely getting shots. His shot attempts went down from 12 a game in December to 8 a game in January. So it's like that's mostly the Porzingis impact. Like Porzingis is taking 12, 14 shots a night. Like they have to come from somewhere. And one of the places they're coming from is Payton Pritchard's shot attempt. So it stood out to me. And then obviously he can still score at will. Like his efficiency hasn't gone down at all. And he had these 2 back-to-back 20-plus point performances, one of which was the comeback or the failed comeback against the Mavs, or I don't even want to use the word failed because they were down by 27 in the fourth and they go down and they're down by 7. And Pritchard really led that charge with Jordan Walsh and Amish Queta and Drew Peterson. So it was an impressive stretch. And he had 17 points in that fourth quarter, comes back and then scores 25 against the Knicks. And it was just an underrated storyline in that Knicks win that he had 25 casually off the bench. Last night, 5 points, 2 for 8 from the field, struggled with a shot, never broke for them, was one of the most important players for the Celtics. And I know everybody that knows me knows that I'm a big Pritchard fan. I'm a huge fan of his game. I just think that he just kind of, just so many things to love about just his tenacity, his shot making, his handle. Like I just love stylistically how he plays. And so I think that there's an element of Pritchard that is underrated because people now know him as like a shot maker. And last night he was not a shot maker. He only had 5 points on the night. But even still, he is doing other things that are critical. He had 10 rebounds, which was tied for a game high with Al Horford. He had 8 assists. And as a playmaker, Al Horford said this himself. Al Horford said after the game when he asked, like, when did the tides turn for you guys? You guys were down by 11 early on. He said when Pritchard checked into the game, the pace completely changed. He's playmaking, he's dribbling, he's driving, he's kicking it out. He's playing with a level of defensive pressure that wasn't there, and it's making everybody else step up. And Al said the same thing about Luke Kornet more broadly, not specifically about last night, but that Luke Kornet is a guy that has been just kind of elevating the play of everybody around him because everybody recognizes, okay, like Luke is trying really hard and Luke is super engaged protecting the rim. Like I kind of have to do that as well. So it was interesting to kind of hear that from Al, that Al actually pointed to Pritchard as like the turning point last night, because if you looked at his stat line, it didn't jump out at you. It really didn't. But Pritchard said to me, like we went back and forth on it for a couple questions, and he was really candid. He was like, I don't care about the shot attempts. Like, as long as we're winning, I don't care. I know that I can score at an elite level. Everybody knows that I can score at an elite level. Some nights they need me to take 3 shots. Some nights they need me to take much more than that. But it's fine either way. That was kind of his take to me. And so it was interesting to hear that, because obviously I know he's a super competitor. He requested a trade, right, when he wanted to get more minutes elsewhere. And so right now he's in that 6-man role. I would be stunned if he doesn't win 6-man of the year. I feel like he kind of comfortably is in the lead there, not just from his stats, but also to how much he's actually contributed to winning, which this award historically does favor guys that contribute to winning. So, just another strong stretch here from him. And he's just been consistent. I know it doesn't necessarily, like, if you don't pay super close attention, it might seem like, oh, early on he was on a heater and then he kind of fell off. But I don't think that's really reflective of what his gameplay has actually been. And so I do agree that he's super underrated. And then great point here about Hauser. I'm going to just mention Hauser has been struggling with a lower back injury. Everybody knows about it. It's something that I feel really bad for him because, low backs are so tough. You don't always know exactly what the problem is, exactly how to fix it. And he still has like a belt. It's like, I think a hot pad or a cold pack or whatever it is. He's clearly still dealing with it on the sidelines. But last night comes in, hits 5 threes. 4 of them were in the second quarter. So it was just a level of like kind of helping the Celtics separate from Miami. And he only had 5 on the night, but those 4 in the second quarter turned it into like from them trailing to actually them taking the lead. They went on an 18-0 run there in that second quarter. So just big minutes. And he played so well alongside Payton, Pritchard, and Luke Kornet. It's unusual for guys to have that level of continuity with one another on the bench. Like normally bench players, they're in, they're out. They're in, they're out. They sign bigger contracts elsewhere. You can't really retain them. If a bench unit works, it means you had some breakout stars, and that means that they're going to go somewhere else. They have managed to keep these guys. Luke Kornet is on a minimum contract. He is not a minimum player. I know that people aren't, people are still getting used to like how effective he actually is as a player, but he's not a minimum player in the NBA anymore. Sam Hauser and Payton Pritchard, I think Hauser's making like 10 a year. Pritchard's making $8 million a year. Probably Pritchard's contract is super undervalued, just considering his impact this year. But those are guys that like they were really able to retain those guys, and now you're seeing continuity and chemistry on that bench. You can sense it in the locker room. They're all good friends, but you can see it on the floor too. You can see how much they're elevating the play of one another and how much they benefit one another. Like I always think Hauser, when Pritchard's on the floor, is a different guy because Pritchard is always looking for him. So in any case, I thought this was another great kind of 2-game road trip here. They've been so good on the road. I know I titled this show, Why Are the Celtics So Dominant on the Road? And I think the real reason is because this is who they are. This is who they're capable of being when they're super locked in. And I think that they've had some games at home where they come back from a road trip and it's like, oh, okay, like we're relaxed. We finally did this difficult road trip. Now it's going to have a little bit of an easier game here when we come back. Same reason why they lose against teams without stars oftentimes, whether it's Anthony Davis. Over the last few seasons, there's so many times where I can point to them losing a big game when the star was sitting, whereas I feel like their odds of winning would actually be higher if the star was playing, because there's a psychological element that's just tough. And sometimes they narrowly avoid losing, like versus the Clippers when they saw their entire starting lineup. Had to go to overtime. Shout out Jaden Springer, no longer with us, but still super key. No longer with the Celtics, I should say, but still super key to this kind of what this team was able to accomplish early on, a couple big games. Just another kind of impressive stretch here. I'll just say being around this team, this has been super fun, and thank you so much for the super chat here. Just being around this team, I've been impressed with just the focus, the mentality going into these road games. You can tell it's just business as usual. And it's just like, we have a goal, we have something we need to accomplish, and we're just going to go and do it. That's how you beat good teams. That's how you're consistently a good team. And that's how you go through 6-7 years of sustained winning, the way that Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown have. I'll be at All-Star Weekend this weekend. I'll probably do a show from All-Star Weekend. Just kind of giving some insights on the ground and all that. I also know that people have reached out to me about doing a show about just like my career and how do you get involved in the NBA media space. And I'm more than happy to give like feedback and advice on that as well. So that's definitely something that we can do. So I will schedule that. Maybe we'll do that over All-Star Weekend as well, because it'll be a little bit of a slower period of time. And then, yeah, I know everybody's talking about the sale. Brad Stevens spoke to us like last week. He said, he doesn't really know much about the sale. He hasn't been super involved. Is there any kind of concern about like how this might impact the team and contracts and trades? Like, absolutely. Everybody's seeing what's happening with the Mavs right now. Like, ownership matters. Like, who's in charge matters. The Celtics have been blessed with really good ownership over over the last like 15 years, right? And so you want to make sure that whoever retains control of this team is aligned on the vision for the future. They're not going to just trade away one of your stars because I don't know what the Mavs were thinking. The more I think about it, the more reckless that one was. But so it does matter, but there hasn't been a ton of reporting or insight on that. And Brad himself was, he's the closest the person we have to like a source on this, and he wasn't able to share too much. So I'll wrap it up here. Thank you all so much for tuning in to today's You Got Boston live episode. As I mentioned, you can find me on the Celtics postgame show on CLNS Media after every game. You can also find me on the Bleacher Report app, 5 o'clock Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays. Download the app, search Celtics. You'll see me on there. So if you want more coverage, if there's not enough coverage, there's always more coverage wherever you're looking. And then I shouted this out earlier, but if you want to read, you can read literally everything there is to know about every single game. I put it in my Celtics notebook. No paywall. It's right there for you. You can read it, check it out on CelticsBlog.com. You can check out all my stories. I've done a notebook after every road game because on the road there are few reporters. I want to make sure to get it all in there for you guys. So thanks so much. I'm heading to the airport right from here. Looking forward to being back in Boston, and we'll have some coverage tomorrow from TD Garden after Celtics Spurs. Thanks, everyone.